Today's video is going to be a fun one. We're going foraging for our nature crafts. I'm going to be sharing my tips, tricks, rules, and guidelines, along with things I like to forage and where I like to go foraging. But before we do that, we need to go prepared. So I like to have appropriate clothing and footwear, take food and water as needed, have sunscreen, bug spray. Keep in mind ticks if they are a concern in your area, along with bear spray if you're going to be in bear country. It's really important to let someone know where you're going in case anything happens as well. Some basic tools I like to use when foraging are these IKEA tarp bags to collect things, some garden gloves, and some pruning shears. One thing I'm not going to be sharing is some food foraging. I'm not an expert in that field, but I do encourage you to take some photos or write in a journal to document your journeys so you know where to go when you want to go foraging again for your crafts. If you're a watercolor artist or a sketch artist, then I encourage you to take that along with you as well. Soak in the beauty and nature that's around you. So these are some walking trails that are really close to my home, and I love to go foraging over in this area, but I'm very mindful of what I forage here. There are lots of grasses, branches, and pine cones. I will forage along the trail edge. I have seen them prune along these trails, and so I know it's okay to trim back some of the branches that grow along there, as there are keepers that we'll trim those back anyways. These branches here are just gorgeous. They've got a beautiful golden yellow lichen that grows on them, and I love how strong they are. They make it really easy to work with for different crafts. So this is the springtime along those same trails, and you can see how full and lush it gets, and that's why they need to trim it back so it doesn't all grow in. These are some branches that I found while I was out camping, and I like branches like these because they make great hangers for some different wall hangings. Pine cones is another item that I love to go foraging for. I'm still learning all the different trees that are out there with different pine cones. These ones are ponderosa pine. They are those nice large pine cones that you typically see scented with cinnamon in craft stores. These are some white spruce tree cones. There are tons of those here around where I live, and there are several other different types of pine cones. Look at all these pine cones on the ground. Wow, that's impressive. So I think I'm going to gather some of these. So here is a nice tree that has fallen, and come over here and there's pine cones, which is perfect. So I'm going to pick those. They're nice and tight still, and there is a way that we can get them to open so we can use them for crafting. I found a whole bunch of these white pine cones. They are like from the white pine tree. They are beautiful. They're nice and long, and they are very, very unique. These ones are wet, so I did have to take them home. You can place them in your oven on a low heat and allow them to dry. These particular ones are pretty tiny. Again, I'm not sure which tree these are from, but they make for fun crafts. This here is a large tree. It's an evergreen tree that drops its pine needles every year, but it leaves behind these knobby branches and beautiful cones. Foraging is a great family activity, so I encourage you to gather up your family and go out and enjoy nature together. So when I do go out, I go in an area that is open to the public. We are allowed to use our forests here where I live. I don't go and forage in provincial parks or national parks. That's equivalent to a state park or a national park down in the United States. We are not allowed to pick natural elements from those areas. You can get permission to forage on private property or anywhere that you know that you are allowed to go and gather some fun things for your crafting needs. Just be respectful of the area that you're foraging from. So birch bark is something that I absolutely forage. But one key thing is that I do not pick bark off of a living tree because you do put the tree at risk of dying. And so I like to collect my bark off of the ground. There is plenty of it in some areas here where I love to go foraging. You can see this is a full tube, and all you have to do is just shake out the dead debris that's inside, and then you can take it home and either set it in the sun to dry it out, or you can place it in an oven on a low temp. Just be careful not to overheat it because you don't want to burn anything. Just keep that in mind if you do take it home to preserve it and place it in the oven. So I'm just cutting some with some pruning shears to help get it off of this old log. But just look around, see what your forest floor has for you to craft with. So I'm still learning and figuring out what other barks I can use. This here is a fir tree, and you can see that it's got some nice bark pieces that you can use for crafting. Here's some more birch bark. I like to even peel it off of these old logs, and you can use scissors, but I prefer to use some pruning shears. This was on a camping trip. This is all I had on hand, so that's what I used, with some junky old scissors. Another area I like to go foraging is along river edges or creeks. Here you can find lots of beautiful greenery and some driftwood and some beautiful rocks that you can use for crafting as well. You can even find some pretty little blossoms like these forget-me-nots for flower pressing. You'll find lots of ferns that grow along a creek. They are great for pressing as well. I also like to gather moss and lichen. These will grow on rocks or in lush green forests. Again, you want to just be mindful of how much you pick. You only want to pick an amount that you know you will use for your crafting needs. So you could place your moss and lichen into an oven on a low temp to kill any mold or bugs that may be in there, but I typically just set it outside and I have had no problems. Another great place to forage is the beach. I like to forage for feathers and pieces of driftwood, some beautiful rocks. This particular beach is out at my mom's, and I even found some beautiful pine cones, and I also found some chestnut trees as well. And those chestnut trees they're not edible, but they dropped the chestnuts to the ground, so I was able to collect some and again use for crafting. You just want to make sure you allow them to dry. This is just a selection of some different things that I found on the beach that was at my mom's. So another place you can forage is your own yard, especially if you got a beautiful garden, or you can maybe even ask a neighbor if you could forage in their yard. This is a beautiful fern that came up on its own in my front yard, and I love to dry the little fronds that are on it. I would absolutely love to know what you like to go foraging for in your area. It's helpful to me as well as for others. So for pine cones, you can again place them in the oven, especially if they're closed tight. But I typically just like to leave them out in the sun and they pop open. But if you're concerned about bugs, then do place any of your items into an oven or in the hot sun. This is a mushroom a fungus piece that I had found on a tree. Now, I did treat this because I have had it where some spores were released and then caused a problem in household plants. So you want to make sure that this is dead and you want to kill any of the molds and bugs that could be in this. So I did place this in the oven at a low temp, and I just kept a close eye on it and allowed it to dry out well. These look great in Christmas wreaths, or you can even paint on these. That's really fun. So I have some lichen. These are really fun to use in some different pieces. I have these lichen covered branches. They're very delicate, so you want to be careful with them, but they are fun to use. And of course, I've got my bark and my pine cones, my moss, and you just want to kind of treat everything the same way. I place everything outside in the sunshine typically, but if you're concerned, then you can definitely put everything in the oven on a low temp. So I have a whole playlist made up for you of all the different nature-inspired crafts that I've made using items such as I shared today. I hope you found this useful for you. Drop me comments down below or any questions, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.